Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at 10 occasions where a football tournament started but didn't end up with a winner, and what the reasons behind the trophies in question not being awarded were. Now, just for clarity's sake, I'm not including times where trophies were revoked, such as Juventus winning Serie A in 2005 or Marseille winning Ligue 1 in 1993, both owing to match-fixing scandals, as they, albeit through cheating, did actually win the tournaments in question, but of course were retrospectively stripped of their honours. I'm also not considering tournaments or league seasons that had barely started before being abandoned. So, for example, even though England's 1939-40 First Division season didn't have a league winner, only 3 games were played before it was cancelled due to England declaring war on Germany. So it's understandable and not particularly compelling as to why a trophy wasn't awarded to the league leaders at the time, which, just in case you were wondering, were Blackpool. If you go on to enjoy this video, of course, please don't forget to smash that like button with such force that you break your foot as well as your hand, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. But without any further ado, let's have a look at 10 occasions in which football trophies were not awarded to the winners. Number 1. The 2019-20 Eredivisie. We start off this video that will no doubt still be fresh in everyone's minds. Perhaps not in terms of the competition, but certainly in terms of the reasons behind it. During the first few months of 2020, the COVID-19 virus started spreading everywhere throughout the world, and by the end of March, virtually every country was under some form of lockdown and social distancing regulation. This had the knock-on effect of sporting competitions being halted en masse for the first time since World War II. But while most football leagues did eventually restart, and subsequently conclude, their league seasons during the summer, some were cancelled altogether, most notably Ligue 1, although in that instance, league leaders PSG were awarded the title. However, some countries took the decision to not only cancel their league season, but void it completely, with no relegation and promotion or title winners being declared. The most high-profile example of this was the Eredivisie, where, after 25 games played, Ajax and AZ Alkmaar were tied at the top on 56 points apiece, with Ajax having a better goal difference and thus topping the table outright. But following the Dutch government's announcement on April the 21st that no events would be allowed to take place until September at the very earliest, the KNVB, the equivalent of the FA in the Netherlands, decided that there was no point in continuing with the league campaign. As such, the season was null and voided, and although the league table on the 8th of March, which would prove to be the final day of the season, was used to determine which teams qualified for Europe, Ajax weren't awarded with their 35th Dutch top flight title. They would have to wait until the following year to get their hands on it. Number 2. The 1909 Scottish Cup. By 1909, it was pretty clear who the two powerhouses in Scottish football were, as only one other team besides Rangers and Celtic had won more than one outright league title, with Celtic having lifted 9 and Rangers 5 by that point. They were already established as bitter rivals, even if the religious elements of the rivalry hadn't quite clicked into gear just yet, and they met each other in the 1909 Scottish Cup final, looking to emphasise their supremacy once more. The match would end in a 2-2 draw thanks to a late Rangers own goal, so a replay was held a week later, although that also ended in stalemate, this time with a scoreline of 1 apiece. The rules stated that another replay was necessary, but the crowd, and the players, believed the game would continue until a winning goal was scored, essentially a golden goal before a golden goal was actually a thing, only realising that that wasn't going to happen when the referee went off the pitch and the officials removed the corner flags. From there, a riot ensued, and given the very small police presence at the game, it was allowed to escalate and get out of control. Over the course of 2 hours, police officers were attacked, Hampden Park was severely damaged, with the goals, fencing around the pitch and turnstiles all set on fire, and when the fire brigade was called upon, they too were pelted with various missiles, and their hoses were either cut off or thrown on the bonfire. Thankfully, as far as we're aware, no one actually died in the riots, although over 130 people were injured, and the two clubs had to reach a compensation with the Scottish FA and Queen's Park, the joint owners of Hampden Park, to get the stadium repaired to fix the damage. Following all of this, the Scottish FA decided not to award the cup to either side, and on the Scottish Cup trophy for the year 1909, it simply says, "Cup withheld." Number 3. The 2021-22 Ukrainian Premier League. We're taking a trip across Europe to Ukraine for our next inclusion, and I think you can probably see where this is going. Following the first half of the 2021-22 Ukrainian Premier League season, the league took a 2.5-month winter break on December the 12th, with Shakhtar Donetsk sitting 2 points clear of Dynamo Kiev at the summit. However, throughout November, Russia had reportedly stationed 92,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, and after conducting military exercises in neighbouring ally Belarus throughout January and February, Putin ordered Russian forces to enter Ukraine on the 21st of February. 3 days later, the dictator announced his decision to conduct what he described as a special military operation, in other words an invasion, to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. In other words, to take control. The soldiers crossed the border the day before the Ukrainian Premier League was due to restart, leaving many players and coaches either stranded in other countries or forced to flee their own homes for fear of their own safety. Understandably, football was put on the back burner, and on April 26th, the league was terminated, with Shakhtar not being awarded the league title. Mercifully, football has resumed in Ukraine, albeit with limited crowds, the continuous threat of the presence of Russian troops around them, and no fewer than 7 clubs having to play their quote-unquote home matches in different stadiums owing to the risks posed with playing at their actual grounds. Number 4. The 1922 German Championship. One of the more light-hearted inclusions in this video takes us to Germany, and to just over 100 years ago. On the 18th of June 1922, giants Nuremberg and Hamburg faced each other in the German Championship final, with the former looking to win a hat-trick of victorias and the latter seeking to win their first ever title. The game finished 2-2 after 90 minutes, but remarkably, they continued playing for another 99 minutes after that, with a match report stating that both sides were clearly shattered and worn out, but unwilling to give up. I mean, that is dedication to the cause right there. Eventually, the referee abandoned the game on account of darkness, with no further goals having been scored, and a replay was scheduled for August the 6th. It would prove to be a violent affair, with Nuremberg's Willy Bosch sent off for kicking an opponent in the stomach. He was later banned for 6 months by the DFB for that incident, and after the game went to extra time again following a 1-1 draw, Nuremberg found themselves down to 8 men thanks to an injury and another sending off. During the halftime interval, Nuremberg's Leutpold Pop collapsed, and the ref, who had also officiated the first match 2 months prior, said that Nuremberg could not continue owing to having 7 players on the field and called the game off. Bear in mind, substitutions weren't a thing back then. The championship, by default, was in theory Hamburg's, but months of legal wranglings ensued, with Nuremberg claiming that it was against the rules to call the game off during an interval. Eventually, whilst the DFB offered the title to Hamburg, they declined it, apparently through pressure by the DFB to turn down their own request, meaning Germany was without a league champion in 1922, although Hamburg would get their hands on the Victoria the following year. Number 5. The 2011-12 and 2012-13 Egyptian Premier League. For 2 straight seasons, the Egyptian Premier League did not have a league champion, which, as far as I'm aware at the very least, is the only time in the 21st century that any country has gone 2 consecutive years without crowning a league winner, despite the majority of fixtures in both of those seasons having been played. If that makes any sense. The first of those 2, 2011-12, was suspended on February 1st, 2012, following the Port Said Stadium disaster in a game between Al Masry and Al Ahly. Al Ahly fans had invaded the pitch following all 3 of Al Masry's goals in the game, but at the full-time whistle, Al Masry fans began to attack and throw missiles at the Al Ahly players, leading to a full-scale riot and the police escorting the players off the pitch. In the ensuing melee, 74 people lost their lives and over 500 more were injured. Not only was the season cancelled outright a month later, with league leaders Haras al-Hudud to deny the first league title in their history, but fans were also banned from attending any league game in Egypt until 2021. The following year, in a switch-up of the league's format, the 18 teams were split off into 2 groups of 9, with the top 2 qualifying for the championship playoffs and the bottom 3 ending up in relegation playoffs. However, neither of those playoff tournaments would actually be played, as on the 3rd of July 2013, the protests that had been raging throughout the year in the country came to a head when incumbent President Mohamed Morsi was removed in an army-led coup d'etat, and the country became a military dictatorship. Amidst the uprising, the Egyptian FA decided to suspend, and eventually cancel, the 2 sets of playoffs and the final round of league fixtures with immediate effect, owing to understandable security concerns. This meant that Al Ahly, who had won the previous 7 league titles prior to 2012 and would win it again in 2014, held on to the league crown for 10 years, and just 8 completed seasons within that time. Number 6. The 1989 Campeonato Profesional. During the 1980s, Colombian football was under the unofficial, but also completely official, control of drug cartels, with the most high-profile figure of all being notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar, who owned Atlético Nacional. It was a game that involved his team on the 26th of October 1989 against América de Cali, who themselves were owned by a rival cartel controlled by the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, that led to the entire 1989 Campeonato Profesional being cancelled and no title winner being declared. In a fiercely charged match, Cali won 3-2, although Nacional were denied a late equaliser by referee Álvaro Ortega, something which infuriated Escobar. 3 weeks later, and just 2 days after Ortega had been the linesman in another game between the two, which ended in a draw this time, Escobar ordered one of his men, Choco, to track down Ortega and kill him. Ortega was out having dinner with a friend on the 15th of November 1989 when Choco's car pulled up near the restaurant, where he proceeded to shoot Ortega 9 times. He was rushed to hospital but was announced dead on arrival, and in the immediate aftermath, the Colombian authorities annulled the season entirely, with no one declared as a league champion. However, the violence and murders wouldn't stop there, reaching another nadir with Andrés Escobar, of no relation to Pablo, who, after scoring an own goal which saw Colombia eliminated from the 1994 World Cup, was murdered by notorious drug lords who had bet huge sums of money on Colombia winning it. Eventually, the drug influence was slowly removed from Colombian football. Pablo Escobar was himself shot dead in 1994, and remarkably, Ortega's nephew, Carlos Ortega, is actually a referee, hoping to honour the legacy of his uncle, whose life was unnecessarily taken away from him at an extremely young age. Number 7. The 1994-95 Gauliga. Similar to a number of examples in this video, the reasons behind the 1944-45 German Gauliga competition not having a winner are pretty obvious once context is applied. Upon the outbreak of World War II, many countries, including England as mentioned in the introduction, abandoned their sporting leagues or changed them to suit wartime conditions. But in one of their numerous attempts to show that they were better than those quote-unquote weak countries, Germany kept theirs going in exactly the same format as before. A staggering 358 teams competed in the 1943-44 season alone, including clubs from Czechoslovakia, Poland and Austria, nations Germany had annexed either prior to or during the war. However, as it became clear that the Axis powers, and especially Germany, were fighting a losing battle during 1944, more athletes were sent off to fight on the front line, leaving many clubs in limbo. Even though all bar one of the 21 Gauligen scheduled to take place, as well as various regional leagues within those Gauligen, did start, only one managed to complete their season, that being the Gauliga Hamburg, with Hamburg winning that particular title. Every other Gauliga was either cancelled or annulled at some point between September 1944 and April 1945, with the final ever Gauliga game taking place between Bayern Munich and 1860 Munich on the 23rd of April, a week before Adolf Hitler shot himself and his wife dead, and 2 weeks before Germany's surrender. Football would swiftly return in the American and French zones of Germany upon its division into 4 parts as Oberligen, but the British-controlled area didn't recommence its football tournament until 1947-48, and the Soviet area only joined the party in 1949. Number 8. The 1981 British Home Championships. The only time we're venturing into international football in this video takes us to the British Home Championships, a tournament which spanned exactly 100 years and was contested by the 4 nations that make up the UK, although Ireland were replaced by Northern Ireland from 1950 onwards. The tournament took place every year barring the interwar periods from 1884 to 1984, but the only time that it started but didn't finish came in 1981. Northern Ireland had been beset by internal fighting since the late 1960s, primarily between Protestant factions who wanted Northern Ireland to remain a part of the UK, and Catholic factions who demanded that Northern Ireland reunite with Ireland and leave the UK, in what would become known as the Troubles. They reached a boiling point in May 1981 when a hunger strike leader for the Provincial Irish Republican Army, Bobby Sands, died in prison, leading to numerous protests and uprisings by the PIRA. Deciding that Northern Ireland was unsafe to visit, the English and Welsh FAs, whose teams were both due to face Northern Ireland and Belfast as part of that year's British Home Championships, pulled out of their respective fixtures, and the tournament was abandoned. Scotland had actually completed their 3 scheduled fixtures, winning against Northern Ireland and England but losing the other against Wales, who would have lifted the trophy had they taken at least a point in Belfast. As it was, they declined to play, so no one was declared as that year's winners, and in 1984, owing to declining attendances and the growing importance of the World Cup and the Euros, the British Home Championships folded altogether. Number 9. The 2022 Bolivian Primera División Clausura. Much like a number of Central and South American nations, the Bolivian División Profesional is split into 2 separate tournaments, an Apertura and a Clausura, with a champion emerging from each competition. The Apertura passed by without incident, with Bolivar lifting their 30th league title in their history following a 3-0 win over the strongest in the final, who clearly weren't the strongest in that particular game. The Klausada, though, didn't get off to the best of starts, as it was delayed by a week because of some difficulties the league had with the introduction of VAR. The next few months were relatively incident-free, but during October and November, protests in the Santa Cruz region of Bolivia reached a new level of intensity. Santa Cruz is one of the most important economic areas in Bolivia as a result of its agriculture, with many of Bolivia's meat and soy exports coming from there, but its residents believe it has been drastically overlooked by the Bolivian government for a long time. Matters came to a head in late October when a new government census was pushed back by 2 years, and the workers of Santa Cruz went on strike, taking to the streets in their numbers in protest against the government's decision, which apparently led to a monthly loss of $700 million for the Bolivian economy. Owing to these uprisings, the División Profesional's higher council suspended the league on October the 21st, with 24 of the 30 scheduled fixtures having been played, and 3 weeks later, with no sign of the protesters backing down, the league was abandoned altogether. No one was declared a winner, and no one was relegated. On a lighter note, a player from Real Santa Cruz stated that if his team were relegated, he would chop off his own penis. But fortunately enough for him, since no relegation was enforced, he didn't have to go through that ordeal. For what it's worth, Santa Cruz were in 14th at the time of the season's abandonment, just 2 places and 3 points ahead of last place Universitario de Vinto, so relegation, and him losing his penis, was a distinct possibility. Number 10. The 2010-11 Syrian Premier League. I didn't particularly want war to be a common theme throughout this video, but sadly, a number of the occasions where leagues have been abandoned, or at least out of the ones I could find, were as a result of a conflict of some sort. The same is true of our last story, namely the 2010-11 Syrian Premier League, which had to be cancelled with just over half the games played because of the onset of the Syrian Revolution. The Syrian public began protesting against President-cum-dictator Bashar al-Assad at the start of 2011, one of a number of uprisings in the Arab world that came to be known as the Arab Spring, and between March and July 2011, a number of demonstrations against the government took place. The protesters were met with police violence and crackdowns on Assad's orders, leading to thousands of deaths and tens of thousands of injuries. The Syrian Premier League was put on hold after the 15th round of fixtures in March and eventually cancelled, with no champions being crowned and no one suffering relegation. There was a playoff in September to determine which team would enter the AFC Cup for the 2012 season, and following league leaders Al Wahda's withdrawal, Al Shorta won a 2-legged tie against Al Jaish to book their spot. In July, the unrest transitioned from protests to a full-scale civil war, containing multiple pro-government, anti-government, terrorist and neutral factions, and no peace settlement has been found in the last 12 years, resulting in hundreds of thousands of deaths and millions more being displaced. Even with all the chaos unfurling around them, football has carried on uninterrupted in the country ever since the 2011-12 season, showing just how crucial the sport can be for the morale of wider society. And that just about wraps up today's video, looking at 10 occasions in which football tournaments were basically abandoned, leading to no winner being declared. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Let me know which other examples, if you can think of any, that I missed out, down in the comments below, although keep in mind that of course the order was completely random and not in any kind of order or something like that. It was just a random selection. But as I say, if you enjoyed it, like the video, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a video straight away. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.